Hey, can I tell you a secret? You know, I've been playing guitar for decades. I did my first pro gig when I was 14. I was touring the club circuit across the United States full time before I was old enough legally to have a drink. It's been my goal in my own playing to achieve fluency on the guitar and be able to move around the neck and improvise without getting lost or feeling stuck. And for years now, I've been helping guitarists around the world of all levels achieve this same kind of freedom. Today, I'm going to show you an exercise that I've come up with after decades of playing that'll allow you to connect the entire fretboard and play through chord changes with ease. But if you can't watch this video for 5 minutes without clicking away to some video about a magic 3-note pattern that's going to allow you to play amazing solos all over the neck without ever having to know any theory, well, honestly, you're probably going to stay where you are skill-wise forever. But I want to say I believe in you. I know you're capable of pushing yourself and your playing to greater places, which is why I'm making this video. And there's a bonus built in to the video that I'm not even going to mention or explain until after we've played through it. So let's get into it. So the main focus of my channel is to provide you tools and knowledge to help you, as I say, make sense of soloing. Playing guitar solos, whether you write them as part of a song or whether you're playing a type of music where you get to improvise a lot, it's fun, it's challenging, it's exciting. But it can also be frustrating if you don't have the tools at your disposal to move around the neck easily and constantly come up with good sounding ideas. So what tools do we need to play a good guitar solo? Well, we can start with scales. And from scales, we're able to select certain notes that are going to become the chords that we then solo over. And if we play the notes of those chords one at a time, we get what are called arpeggios. We can then take parts of scales and arpeggios, infuse them with phrasing and cool rhythms, and turn them into licks and motifs, which are little musical statements that we can combine together to hopefully make up an awesome solo. In this video, I'm going to show you how to connect the notes of the major scale and the 7th arpeggios that come out of those notes all over the neck of the guitar. Now, licks, phrasing, and motifs, we're going to have to get into that another time. So let's start with the major scale, specifically the G major scale down at the 3rd fret of the low E string. So without getting too far into theory, the major scale has 7 notes, and the G major scale has the notes G, A, B, C, D, E, and F sharp. And we can also refer to these notes as the root, 2nd, major 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and major 7th. And knowing those intervals, it's going to be really important to your ability to choose the right notes over chords. Some just sound better than others. So here's a 2-octave scale pattern for G major, starting at the G, the 3rd fret of the low E. We've got G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G our octave, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and G our 2nd octave. So the 7th arpeggio that we can build off that G note or our root is G major 7. And we're going to get that by playing every other note of our scale. So we've got G, B, D, and F sharp, or the root, the major 3rd, the 5th, and the major 7th. And while there are many major 7 arpeggio shapes, this is the one we're using here, and here's the cool thing about it. When we get to that major 7 in the 2nd octave, if we make a little position shift with our pinky, we are right here at the G note at the 8th fret, and we can play right back down the scale pattern we just learned. Super slick, and this is the crux of the whole exercise. We're going to be doing this with all 7 notes and the 7 7th arpeggios in the key of G, and ultimately you're going to be able to do this in every key. Also, we can and need to practice the exercise starting with the arpeggio, playing into the scale and back down like we just did, or we can reverse that and play the scale first and then the arpeggio. So let's take it up to the 2nd note of the G major scale which is A. If we move to the 5th fret of the low E string and play a 2-octave pattern starting on A, we get this shape. And once again, we can build a 7th arpeggio off that A note by playing every other note from the scale pattern, and we get A minor 7. And those notes are A, C, E, and G, or A is the root, C is the minor 3rd, E is the 5th, G is the minor 7. And I'm using this minor 7 shape because the position shift is built into that D string, and it puts us into perfect position to play back down the scale pattern after the arpeggio. And you would do the drill the same way. You can play the scale pattern into the arpeggio or the arpeggio into the scale pattern. How about the 3rd note of the G major scale, which is B? Here's our 2-octave scale pattern, starting with B. And when we build our 7th arpeggio, we're going to get another minor 7 arpeggio. And we've got the notes B, D, F sharp, and A. And using that same arpeggio shape, we're again going to be in perfect position to play back down the scale after the arpeggio. We're really covering some ground now. Now the 4th note of the G major scale is C, and here's our 2-octave scale pattern, G major scale starting on the C note. And building out this 7th arpeggio from C, we're going to get a major 7 arpeggio this time. We've got the notes C, E, G, and B. And from that 2nd octave B, or major 7, we're going to shift up one note, and bam, here's our scale pattern. And conversely, if we play up the scale pattern from C to C in 2 octaves, we just shift our pinky down to the B note, and there's our major 7th arpeggio. On to the 5th note, which is D, and the scale pattern looks like this. And the 7th arpeggio we get when building off the 5th note of a major scale, it's going to be a dominant 7 arpeggio. So just plain old D7 with the notes D, F sharp, A, and C, or the root, major 3rd, 5th, and flat 7. And here's the shape we're going to use. Once again, there's going to be a position shift from that flat 7, our C note, up to D, and it puts us in position to flow right down the scale pattern. How about the 6th note of G major, which is E? Here's our 2-octave scale pattern. In building out the arpeggio from the 6th note of a major scale, we're going to get a minor 7 arpeggio. It would be E minor 7 in what should now be our familiar shape. And we've got the notes E, G, B, and D. And as is the goal of this exercise, we're going to be able to play through our arpeggio shape and then right back down the scale pattern. And then the last note of the G major scale is F sharp, and here's our scale pattern starting with that F sharp. And when we build the arpeggio off of the 7th note of a major scale, we're going to get a minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio. So F minor 7 flat 5 has the notes F sharp, A, C, and E, or the root, the minor 3rd, the flat 5, and the flat 7. And then once we get to that flat 7, we can make a shift up to F sharp, and as with all the other arpeggio shapes, we play right down the scale pattern. That brings us back to G, and that completes the scale patterns and arpeggios for that key. So in a major scale, we've got 2 major 7 arpeggios, and they're going to be built off of the root and the 4th degree of the scale. We've got 3 minor 7 arpeggios. They're going to be built off the 2nd, 3rd, and 6th degree of a major scale. And then we've got a dominant 7 arpeggio that's going to be built off of the 5th degree, and a minor 7 flat 5, or half diminished as it's called, that's built off of the 7th. And it's really super important that you get your head around this and commit it to your memory banks. And do you remember in the intro to the video when I told you there was a bonus built in that I wasn't even going to mention until after we'd played through it? You just played through, if you played along with me, the patterns of the 7 modes of the major scale. Now, I'm not going to get into that theory today. I've done other videos on how to play and learn the modes. But you should know that you just played through all the 7th arpeggios in the key of G and the 7 corresponding modes. Now you can give yourself a little pat on the back, but don't rest on your laurels just yet, because now we're going to try to put all this stuff together and connect it. Here's how I want you to practice this. I want you to get to where you can play through all 7 arpeggios and scale patterns continuously without stopping. So we're going to ascend through the arpeggio, we're going to descend through the scale, and to be able to play even groupings of 8th or 16th notes, when we get back to our root of that scale pattern, we're going to add the note above the next scale pattern and arpeggio root, like this with G. So I played B before moving to A, and then I would go into A minor, 7 arpeggio, and then the pattern moving back down. Ultimately, you're going to be able to do this. So another thing that I think is super important. Now, we just played through 2-octave scale and arpeggio patterns with roots on the low E string. But I think it's crucial that you need to be able to do that same 2-octave drill with roots starting on the A string. And we're going to do that in the key of C so that we can easily move up the fretboard without having to jump back down once we get to a certain point and run out of frets. Starting with the C at the 3rd fret of the A string, C major has the notes of C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. And here's the 2-octave scale pattern starting with that C. And the arpeggio that we get when we build it off the root, remember now it's a major 7. So we're going to have C major 7. We've got the notes C, E, G, and B are our root, 3rd, 5th, and major 7. And once again, we're going to use arpeggio shapes that are going to flow into the scale patterns. And with just a little position shift from the 7th fret or the B, we're going to be able to move into the C note and then play down our pattern. So here's our arpeggio, and here's our scale pattern. Now the second note of the C major scale is D. Here's our scale pattern. And remember, off the 2nd degree of a major scale, the arpeggio that we build is a minor 7. Here we've got the notes D, F, A, and C. So here's the entire arpeggio shape. And we're going to shift up from that C to D, and we're going to play right back down our scale. The 3rd note of C major is E, and we have this scale shape. In the arpeggio off the third, remember it's again a minor 7. We've got the notes E, G, B, and D. Here's our shape. And we're once again going to shift up from the flat 7 to the root of the arpeggio and play back down the scale. F is the fourth note of C major. Here's our scale pattern. And the arpeggio built off the fourth is another major 7. It's going to be F major 7 this time. And we've got the notes F, A, C, E. And there's our entire shape. We're going to make a little shift up to F and we'll flow right down our scale pattern. The fifth of C is G, and remember that the fifth chord of a major key is going to be a dominant 7. So here's our scale pattern. And here's a G dominant 7 shape with the notes G, B, D, and F. And when we get to that second F, we're going to make a shift up to G and play down our scale. And moving right along to the sixth, or A, here's our scale shape. And the sixth degree, remember, gives us a minor 7th chord in arpeggio. We've got the notes A, C, E, and G. And we're going to shift up to A and play down the scale. Lastly, the 7th note of C major is B. Here's our scale pattern. And we know the chord in arpeggio built off the 7th is minor 7 flat 5. B minor 7 flat 5 has the notes B, D, F, and A. We're going to shift up from that A to our B note and bring us right down the scale. And that brings us back to Do, as the song goes, or C. And as with our patterns with the root on the 6th string, I want you to practice this until you can play it continuously and unbroken. So let's give that a try. And remember that little trick of interjecting that extra note so we can play even groupings of 8th or 16th notes. So that is a big exercise. But if you want to make big gains in your playing, that's the kind of effort that you have to put in. And think about all we accomplished with this one exercise. We learned 2-octave scale patterns off of each note in a major scale. We learned to play those patterns with the root on the low E or the A string. And what we really learned were patterns for the 7 modes of the major scale. We learned shapes for all the 7th arpeggios in a major key, and we learned those arpeggio shapes with roots on either the low E or the A string. And we learned an exercise to string all those ideas together. Now what you do with it from here, well, that's up to you. But if you enjoyed learning about modes today, here's a link to another video about the modes. It goes much more in depth, talks about how to play them, how to learn them in the way that I think is best. It's an awesome tool. I know it'll be great for your playing. Check it out.